edition of the Checkerboard Chat. I am Ryan Schumpert, joined as always by Noah Taylor. We're here today, sitting here on a Wednesday, pre-Kentucky week as Tennessee gets win number 4 last Saturday over UAB. We'll discuss that, preview this Saturday's matchup with Kentucky, and then talk a little bit of Vols hoops as Tennessee is 1-0 with a win last night over UNC Asheville. Starting last weekend, Noah, homecoming win. Not much drama. A good thing for Tennessee after especially some games earlier in this year. What was kind of your takeaway?
Well, it went about as I expected. A game that Tennessee was never really needed out for them. I know we talked about this before, but you go back and look at that Georgia State game, and you would have thought November 2nd, UAB, that's a very dangerous game. They've been playing their best football lately. So there was really no doubt. The very first play of the game, Bryce Thompson gets the first of 3 interceptions, sets Tennessee up a far cry from how they started against South Carolina, but both games are wins, and now they're 4-5, and it gave everybody an opportunity to kind of get in there. You didn't really have to use Brian Maurer at all, which is good, especially with this final stretch coming up. You want him to be as healthy as you can. So I think you got everybody out of there relatively healthy. Won a game pretty comfortably, played great defense like they have been against a solid team. I mean, that's a UAB team we talked about already, that one of the top defenses in the country, and you were able to, thanks mostly to their own mistakes, turning the ball over, got out of there with a solid win, and you just need 2 more games and you're bowl eligible. So
yeah, I think that's a way that Jeremy Pruitt probably enjoys winning. I feel like the way most defensive coaches enjoy winning, kind of similar to that Mississippi State game. And I think that's going to be the question going forward is can Tennessee win games like that with the offense struggling the way it did at times? And I don't know. I think they could maybe win a Vanderbilt game like that. I think the Kentucky game is one that's probably just due to the nature of both teams going to be a rock fight, going to be a low-scoring game. I'm not sure about Missouri, whether they can win that way. I think a lot of that probably depends on Kelly Bryant's health and kind of the morale of that team, as they could easily be coming off 4 losses going into that game. But I'll pose a question for you here. I didn't give you this ahead of time, so kind of throwing you on the spot here. But what do you think with Tennessee's offense? What do you think the biggest question mark or concern is going into Kentucky? Is it the offensive line that had probably its worst game of the season against UAB? Is it the quarterback play? What they're going to do there? What do you think is kind of the biggest question mark?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think the offense, like you said, that offensive line it was showing a lot of progress the last couple of weeks and just kind of took a step back against UAB. Like we said, it's good UAB defense, but you're going to be facing bigger and better defenses down in this stretch. I know Missouri is kind of a defensive team that comes to mind. Kentucky's a defensive team that comes to mind. So they're going to have to play better. They're going to have to play a lot better and protect the quarterback. And then that goes back to the other, issue. Who's going to play quarterback and if they're going to play well. Garantano, played well, when coming in against South Carolina. But then I think made a few mistakes that against UAB didn't play great, by any means. But then again, they won that game 30-7, so it didn't really affect them. But it will in games coming up. Just you can't turn the ball over. You can't take sacks if you don't have to. Again, that's up to the offensive line. If they're going to be back there hitting them all day, then you really can't control that. But yeah, I think those 2 factors. I mean, we all know the receivers are great. You got to get them the ball. That comes back to protecting Garantano long enough to throw the football and not, lose a ton of yards and set them up in a bad field position. I think the run game too has got to be better. And again, that comes down to blocking up front. So I guess after my answer here, I kind of realized that the offensive line is the biggest question mark, and is going to be if they continue to take a step back like they did last Saturday, then it's going to be really tough to win 2 out of 3. I think they beat Vandy. Yeah. I know we'll go ahead and put that on the record. I think they'll beat Vanderbilt. But these next 2 are teams that I think Tennessee identifies with a lot, and you can't make mistakes like that in those games.
I think the interesting thing about the quarterback, or maybe interesting thing to watch how they handle the quarterback, is I feel pretty confident they're going to play 2.
Yeah.
2 of them, not number 2. I feel Garantano number 2, I think will be one of the ones that will be playing.
Yeah.
And whether that's, I would think probably Maurer if he's practicing. But I think you kind of have seen almost a change in the mindset of the coaches in the past month and a half. I think you go back after the Florida game to the Georgia game, it was, I don't think they thought Maurer was ready, or they weren't sure Maurer was ready. And I think they did the same thing with Shrout for the South Carolina game. They really dedicated the game plan to what he could do, and they felt like they just had to make a change in the way they were playing it, and they really dedicated everything to what he could do, really spent a lot of time trying to rapidly speed him up and get him ready. And I think you saw, in which maybe he just wasn't playing Saturday because they wanted to be cautious, which, and especially the way Tennessee's offensive line is playing, that probably would have been a dumb thing. He probably would have taken some hits. But I think the fact that you saw Garantano play so much, and just the way the defense has been playing so much better, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying a little bit. I'm kind of rambling here, but I think they would like to win these rock fight, low-scoring games, and I think that's almost what you're going to get with Garantano. Is Garantano enough to go out and really play really well and score 35 points for your offense and win the game? I'm not sure about that. And I think that's going to be what's going to be interesting to see, is do the coaches believe that they can kind of play good defense and just manage the game and trust Garantano not to make too many mistakes and win, 24-20 here down the stretch, or do they feel like they need to go to Maurer? They need a little more higher ceiling for the offense, because Maurer's going to make some mistakes, and that's just the risk of it. You saw that. Yeah. You saw that with Mississippi State, and I think they were probably wary of that against UAB, because as good as their defense is playing against UAB, and really as good as their defense has played for the most of the last month, they're going to be able to be in the games with anybody they're playing down the stretch, and really most teams on their schedule outside of the Alabamas, Floridas, Georgias that are just a little bit ahead of them talent-wise. But I think that's the big question: is do they feel confident enough that they can really, not that, like I said, I think both of them are going to play, but JG the past 2 weeks would have been playing if he didn't get hurt against South Carolina, and then what he did against UAB, the vast majority of the reps. He's not the starting quarterback, but he's playing the most snaps for Tennessee at quarterback right now, which is kind of a interesting change from 6 weeks ago, where when Tennessee started to play a little bit better, it looked like they were clearly going to move in another direction from him, but obviously some injuries have complicated that.
I think, too, another concern is what kind of Brian Maurer are you going to get when he comes back, because 2 weeks in a row the guy just got rocked, and he was playing good football. I mean, for a freshman coming in, was playing good football for Tennessee. He was moving the ball downfield. But what's he like after 2 head injuries? Does he come back? Does he play skittish? Does he play a little bit afraid? I mean, I wouldn't blame him. I mean, like the guy, especially if he sat there on the sideline and watched the horror show that was that offensive line last week. I mean, what kind of Brian Maurer are you going to get from here on out? And, I mean, going back to the thing you said about the rock fights, too, I agree. I think that is something Jeremy Pruitt likes. I mean, we know he's a defensive guy. I mean, he kind of, the other day, I almost kind of chuckled a bit in the press conference when he said, if I can't coach defensive backs, I don't want to coach at all. I think that the defense is good enough to where Tennessee feels very confident that if they go into the fourth quarter in a game that is like 13-10 or 17-14 or something like that, they feel very confident they can win that football game with what they have. And like you said, comes down to what quarterback they have back there who can kind of be that guy, that game manager that just kind of runs the clock out and doesn't make mistakes.
And for the offensive line, I think the big question mark really is this weekend. I think that bye will be the week after will be really good for that group because, not to say, I mean, the guys that play every week up there, Trey Smith, Brandon Kennedy, Jerome Carvin, didn't have their best games Saturday, and those guys are probably banged up a little bit, but mostly healthy. But they're missing Darnell Wright, his backup. Marcus Tatum had a rough afternoon. Jameer Johnson, kind of their swing guy, 6-man, didn't play. Wanya Morris did play, but was the worst game of his early career. It was a forgettable night for Morris, and he was a guy that was knocked out of the South Carolina game, so he's certainly dealing with things. Right. So can they create some run game this week against a physical, good front seven for Kentucky? That, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge. I think once they get a little more healthy against the Missouri defense and then a Vandy defense that's kind of struggled as well, they'll be able to find their footing. But can they find enough of that this week, and can Tennessee get enough in the passing game from Jarrett Garantano? If they can't run the ball at a high level, will be the biggest question for the offense in Kentucky.
I think, too, sorry to interrupt you, but I think, too, a factor that goes into Kentucky's in a similar spot right now. What are they, 4-4, 4-5 as well? And I mean, they've got to win 2 more to get to a bowl game. And I think they feel pretty confident that they can get there as well, even with a lot of the adversity they've faced. A ton of injuries, especially quarterback. They got a wide receiver playing quarterback, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second. But Kroger Field at night, that's their
gonna be cold. I was
gonna be cold.
Just checking 42. I think is the high for that day. So
nice.
7:30 kick. I'm sure will be nice into some freezing temperatures. Yeah.
So that'll be great. I feel like Big Ten football weather. But yeah, I mean I'm sure the Kentucky fans will be up for that. I think it'll be a really tough road environment because these are 2 teams that desperately want to win, that desperately need to win this game. Not only is it a rivalry game, rivalry game Tennessee's largely dominated. Even in a 5-7 year last year, they were able to beat what I thought was a really good Kentucky team. Maybe shut them down. So don't think that won't be on Kentucky's mind coming out here and trying to. I guess Tennessee's now favorite.
Swung about 5 points.
Right. So, that'll be on their mind. They'll probably feel a little disrespected. I think it'll be a really, really close, as you described it, rock fight. The type of game Tennessee's been in the last few weeks.
I think that's the crazy thing about last year's game is obviously Kentucky came in number 11 and Tennessee dominated. And I think everyone was surprised Tennessee dominated. I'm not sure anyone was shocked Tennessee won just because of the limitations.
Right.
Kentucky had an offense and they'd lost the week before to Georgia, which kind of eliminated their SEC championship race. But what impressed me is, I thought after that game they were number 11 in the country. Like, these guys are maybe 20-25, and they look bad right now. And they didn't play the hardest schedule in the rest of the regular season, but they bounced back. They won out, got to 9-3, got to an Outback Bowl and beat Penn State, which was a tremendous win for Mark Stoops and his program, and we'll kind of pivot into that now as we start talking about Kentucky. Mark Stoops' name out there, rumored a lot with Florida State this week, with that one becoming open. Do you think that much of a big deal for Kentucky, going to have much of an effect on them on Saturday?
I'm going to say this is like my favorite time of the year with that. There's so many things to love about it. Not only the names being thrown around, who knows, if Mark Stoops is a legitimate choice. You did think he is.
Yeah.
The guy was a successful defensive coordinator at Florida State before taking that Kentucky job. Florida State's a desirable job. You got a great recruiting base. You've got good facilities that I know they want to make better. They won a national championship in 2013, so that's recent memory.
Weak conference, down ACC right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark Stoops, he won 9 games in the SEC last year. When the SEC, actually one of its better years, I think top to bottom in a long time. That looks really desirable when Clemson is your biggest. Clemson's on top. It's like the SEC now with Alabama.
Yeah.
That's now we got LSU, but that has got to be that makes it even more of a desirable job. So who knows? Bob Stoops was, the guy, like he was going to take the job yesterday or this week, and there's no way. Usually, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but usually in these college, and we know all too well at Tennessee, in these college coaching searches, the first name guy that's going to take the job the week. The
week after it comes open.
It's never happened. And it come to find out, it was never close to happening.
No.
The John Gruden situation comes to mind. So Bob Stoops, I didn't think that was going to happen. I was a little surprised at how much it was gaining traction, but that's just the way it is. So going back to Mark, his brother, I think that could play a little bit of a factor, especially if he's considering it. He was asked about it the other day. Another great thing I love about this time of year, when the coaches don't say no.
Yeah.
And, maybe he's looking for a raise. That could be. He didn't say no. He said it was more of a compliment. That could be on the players' minds. That could be on the fans' minds. This is the best coach they've had maybe ever, next to Bear Bryant a long time ago, back in the 50s. So it could be something that plays a factor. If Kentucky players and coaching staff think there's a legitimate shot he's going to take that Florida State job, or at least consider it, that could really affect their morale and work in Tennessee's favor, I think.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to look at with Stoops, and I think it's just kind of a belief I hold in general, is I think coaches a lot of times look to jump or think it's time to jump when they've kind of reached the peak at a school. And I think last year was about the peak of what they could do. And we're saying that, they don't have a great record right now, but again, they have a very manageable schedule down the stretch. They could, they should go to a bowl game and really could, if they win Saturday, win 7 or 8 games again, in which I think that's, obviously they can win 9 games, but he's doing about as well at Kentucky as you can do. So I think right now is almost an ideal time for him to make a jump, and I think Florida State's a job that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure he'll be their first choice, but I do think he will be on their short list.
Another thing to take into account there, you talk about him hitting a ceiling. Georgia is Georgia. They've been really good the last few years. Their recruiting hasn't dropped off at all, so you got to think they're going to keep getting better. Maybe they've hit their ceiling, but if their ceiling is 10, 11 wins and an SEC East championship every year, I think they could take that for the foreseeable future. So you got Georgia. Tennessee's looking like they're getting better. Florida's getting better. South Carolina is, I think, a very competitive team with a Will Muschamp. Maybe not great, but I think a 6, 7, 8 win team, solid. That's going to be something he's got to look at too. Do I want to keep playing these guys every year? Because Kentucky, if that was their ceiling, then there's really nothing to look forward to. Because you're just going to, if Florida's and Georgia and Tennessee's best are going to top Kentucky's best every time. So if Kentucky's best is 9 wins, you got to think, well, what's the ceiling for Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee? So, I think that's something too that'll make him have to take a serious look at that job. Yeah,
I think it's not, Kentucky hasn't been there since Bear Bryant's been there, but there's only just so many wins to go around, and it's, I think, very clear at this point that Mullen at Florida and Kirby at Georgia have it cemented as the top 2 programs. And I have a hard time seeing Kentucky reaching that level. I think it's completely open in the next group: Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, and maybe to a lesser extent Vanderbilt will have a chance to jump up and claim that spot. But Florida State is going to be tough to reach Clemson. As much success as they've had recently, but there's not a school with more history and a better formula to win than Florida State in that conference right now. And they're not great, and, I know their talent, Jimbo didn't lead the program in great shape, but is some talent on that roster. And
it's better than what they've been.
Yeah.
It's better than the way they've been the last 2 seasons. That talent on that roster is better than that.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to Willie Taggart just hasn't been able to get a quarterback.
Right,
The
offensive line was there, too. Really bad.
Yeah, very bad. Especially last year was very, very bad.
If Garantano ever thinks about transferring, not that we have no clue if that's going to happen or not, but I wouldn't say Florida State would be one of these choices. He's had enough of that patchwork offensive line to play behind. I think that's Garantano's got his faults, but I think that's been a huge reason too. I wouldn't want to play behind although it's getting better,
it's been better this season.
It's been better,
but last season especially, and even 2017. In 2017, you kind of block it out just because of so much drama that was with the coaching search. But that second half of the 2017 season, that was as bad as a Tennessee roster that they've ever put on the field, and they were starting some walk-ons on the offensive line. The offensive line was the epitome of where they were so far behind just everyone they were playing. And then, pivoting kind of back to this Kentucky matchup, you look at the quarterback situation. Looks like Sawyer Smith may come back and play some. Lynn Bowden's had some success. What do you think? Should Tennessee be more concerned about Sawyer Smith coming back? Do you think just Lynn Bowden playing is more of a concern for Tennessee? And what do you expect to see from Kentucky at that spot?
I think both of them. I think Sawyer Smith would be a bit of a concern just because Tennessee probably hasn't got to have much tape on him, first of all. I can't even think of the last time the guy played an entire game. I know against Florida he played really well for 3 quarters and hurt his hand in that game.
Yeah.
And that kind of affected probably his play down the stretch. I don't know if that's been the reason he's been out, but I'd say he's probably struggled with injuries and everything. So that could be a factor, but Tennessee doesn't have a great history of going up against Kentucky quarterbacks who were wide receivers. I haven't seen Bowden play a lot this year, but, we saw him against Missouri a little bit and against Georgia a few weeks ago. I'd say he definitely throws a wrinkle in there. I haven't been able to watch him pass the ball too much, but I'd say that definitely is something Tennessee is a concern. How to slow him down. If he decides to throw the ball and have a really good night throwing the ball, then what does Tennessee really prepare for? Him running, him throwing. What do they do? And then throwing Smith in there is just another wrinkle that adds. Maybe Stoops tries to do what Pruitt did against South Carolina. You know, switch quarterbacks in and out, which is really hard to do. But if you run it to perfection, or at least are consistent with it, then that's definitely a big factor. That could really mess up this defense that's played really well lately.
Yeah, I think even if I don't think he'll play the full game at quarterback, but even if Sawyer Smith is just available to play, I think that could potentially make such a big factor just in 2-minute situations at the end of the half, into the game. You know, fourth quarter, Tennessee gets up 2 possessions. That could help Kentucky pick up its pace a little bit on offense. Not to say that they're going to start throwing the ball all over the yard for 200 yards in the fourth quarter or anything, but just having that option is definitely an advantage. Just having him, there ready to play. I know you've heard me say this. I've been saying this to anyone who'll listen over about the past month. But I do think this Kentucky game sets up well for Tennessee in the fact that since Jeremy Pruitt's been there, they've done great against teams that could just run the ball.
Yeah.
You look back at some of their worst performances in the Jeremy Pruitt era. You look at Alabama game last year, which granted it's Alabama, but West Virginia game last year, Missouri game last year, Florida game this year. Teams that were throwing the ball a lot have given Tennessee a lot of problems.
Yep.
You look at Mississippi State, you look at South Carolina this year, you look at the Kentucky game last year, games where Tennessee has had success, especially on the defense, and BYU game this year.
Yep.
Teams that really need to establish the run first to kind of get their quarterback in a rhythm, not a good quarterback. Tennessee, under Jeremy Pruitt, has had tremendous amounts of successes in those games, and I actually think I saw the Tennessee Twitter account tweeted out there's been 3 times in Pruitt's year and a half here that the team they've played has had their fewest rushing yards of the season against Tennessee. So if Sawyer Smith is the quarterback and Tennessee's able to load the box with the way this front seven's been playing the past few weeks, I think that bodes really well for Tennessee on defense. I think Tennessee will have a lot of success on that end of the field. I think my question mark for Saturday's game for Tennessee is significantly more on the offensive side of the ball than it is the defense. But it'll certainly be interesting to watch. Lynn Bowden is a very, very dynamic player and has been a very good runner. He's the leading runner and receiver on their team right now. So he's a very good player, and it presents – I think he's a little bit better than just you think about your average Wildcat guy or you think about plugging in there. It's just he's such an explosive player. We'll change it up a little bit here, and we'll go in talking about Tennessee basketball. This past weekend, we saw Uros Plasic got denied his eligibility. Tennessee's been waiting a long time on that one. I think a lot of disappointment. Both Fulmer and Barnes had some outspoken statements with some frustration, I think, with NCAA with their decision. But boy, does that make Tennessee small right now. Just going to have 10 scholarship players eligible to play this season. Drew Pember banged up last night, so they just had 9 last night, and not a whole lot of post players. Only played 8 guys so the last 4 minutes. And what do you think that, I guess, dual question here. What did you see from Tennessee last night in their win from their guys that are going to have to step up and kind of fill in those shoes of Plasic, and how much of an issue do you think that's going to be for Tennessee?
Well, I think you could hear the concern in Rick Barnes' voice last night in the post-game press conference. He said that his senior leaders, Turner and Bowden, need to get the ball inside more because, and I think his biggest concern there is they need to get the experience of playing down there. Because, and there's no better time to do that than against UNC Asheville. All respect to them, but that's a game Tennessee should win, at least 9 times out of 10. Murray State, I think, will be a little more of a challenge. But yeah, you got a really tough non-conference slate ahead. The SEC is going to be really good, I think. So now is the time to get those guys working inside because you're not going to have Uros in there. You're going to have to get those guys experience to play inside, to try to score, to try to rebound. And if you're not getting them the ball this early, then you're going to make a huge mistake if you try to do it later. Yeah. And it's not there. You're kind of going back to the football talk we had, one-dimensional. You don't want to be one-dimensional. So I think he was very concerned about that. I can see why. I thought last night, I wasn't really shocked that guys like Turner and Bowden Turner led again like he did in the exhibition, led with points, turned the ball over a lot again, especially in the first half. I can see why he's concerned there. I thought, Fulkerson played well, but yeah, it was definitely not a very pretty win. They are 1-0. I know they'll take that, but And it's the first game of the year. You know, they'll get better. But I can definitely see why he's concerned about his front court right now.
Definitely, and you know, it's going to be different every game just because, I mean, Tennessee is so outsized in SEC play.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to be fine or, you know, adequate rebounding. You know, they don't have much size, but I think Pons is a good rebounder.
Oh, yeah.
I think Nemois is a good rebounder. I just think the length this team has.
They rebounded well last night.
Yeah, I mean, their only guard that really can't get down there and rebound any is Gaines, and he's just played 10 minutes last night. Josiah James, a big, strong kid who I think will rebound well. Defensively, I think they're going to have a lot of problems guarding big guys. You know, we'll get to see it. 2 huge tests here pretty early in the year. Play Washington next weekend up in Canada. 2 lottery picks projected in Washington's front court, and then certainly James Wiseman from Memphis had an excellent debut last night. I think about 28 and 12 for him.
Yeah.
So those are going to be
their team.
Those are going to be big tests early in this year for Tennessee there. So we'll get a better idea. And then going to the backcourt, that senior leadership. I kind of thought Tennessee was pressing a little bit last night. Turner and James especially. The turnovers were bad. I think they were really, in which they're going to have to do it. They're going to have to push the ball up the court. Yeah. But I think they took some ill-advised passes, forced things a little bit too much. And that's what Barnes was saying in the post-game press conference. They were just making uncharacteristic mistakes that he hadn't seen in practice, going too quick at times. And he was really complimentary of guys like Devontae Gaines and Jalen Johnson for letting the offense come to them and just kind of playing through the offense. I'll pivot here to a question, and this, you know, I don't know how big of a concern this is just this early in the season, but Josiah James, 5-star, only Tennessee player outside of Zach Cannon, just played about 3 minutes last night, who played and didn't score, I think, 8 or more points.
Too.
Yeah, he started. Don't have the stats in front of me, but I think he was 1 for 5 from the field, 2 points. How much concern is there to you, and what are you expecting for him going forward?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, I know it's the first game, but you know he did start the game, and then again that could go back to what Barnes was saying last night. Not only did he want to see the bigs get the ball more, he wanted to see the freshmen get the ball more, and you know maybe that's kind of a concern there that they're not moving the ball around enough and giving those guys opportunities to score. I'd say, you know, first game for a freshman. I don't remember how many rebounds he had.
I think he had 3.
3.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll just see a guy that progresses. I mean, I feel like people kind of put a lot of stock into the 5-star rating in college basketball because you kind of expect these guys to come in and be. Not all of them are going to be one-and-done type guys. You know, they're not going to come in and wow you right away. Some places they do, like Kentucky last night. Yeah, but, and
Maxey was good.
Oh yeah,
he's a real deal.
It's ridiculous, but you're not going to get that everywhere. And it's, you know, he said this about Olivier, not James, but I think it kind of goes for him too. Barnes didn't seem too concerned about James' performance. I don't really remember him not really calling it out, but kind of addressing it, if I remember correctly. But he talked about Olivier, and I think it kind of the same kind of goes for James and all the freshmen. They're going to get better as the year goes on, and you know I guess that just comes with playing time, and you know they obviously put a lot of stock in him to start him last night. He wasn't even listed on the probable starter sheet for the second week. Well, I don't think he started in the
It flipped. He was on the probable starters for an exhibition, didn't start, and then wasn't on probable starters last night, and then ended up starting.
So, I mean, it's going to be a game-by-game thing. And they're, like you said, Washington, Memphis, Wisconsin coming up. Wisconsin lost last night to a top
good
20 St. Mary's team. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of tests and a lot of opportunities. We're going to be able to tell more, I think, more in those games than we will, you know, in coming up. You know, if against Murray State, team that lost a lot of good pieces from last year, maybe not so much. But when it gets into like big boy basketball, you know, maybe we'll see from there how good these guys can be.
Yeah, I mean, it gets, like I said, next Saturday when they go up to Canada to play Washington, I think that's really when it gets serious. They had that game, then they jump right in the Emerald Coast Classic where they'll play
Purdue,
for Florida State, and then either Purdue or VCU in that second game. And going back to James, I think, you know, I don't think he's going to be a one-and-done guy. Maybe that's just a little overreaction from watching him one time, but I don't think Tennessee fans should necessarily be hitting the panic button on, you know, obviously it wasn't a great performance from him last night, but he's a guy that missed a lot of practice time before.
That's true.
He clearly doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in his three-point shot right now. And, I think as he gets in more of a rhythm, lets the offense maybe come to him a little bit more, he'll get a little bit more comfortable. And I don't think he's a guy that's going to score 20 points a game or 15 points a game, but I don't think he's going to be one that's going to score 2 points a game either.
I think also last night, too, he had a couple of good looks that just didn't fall either.
Yeah.
That probably could have helped. But, I guess that's just going to happen. You have to fight through nights like that.
Yeah, certainly. So the Vols basketball team will be off this weekend, returning to action, as we had stated, against Murray State Tuesday. One last note before we wrap it up, in recruiting Jay Hardy, the 4-star defensive end from the Chattanooga area, Macaulay High School today, kind of pulls a little bit of a shocker, committing to Auburn over Tennessee. I think most people had pegged the Vols as the option there. A tough loss for Tennessee, a big loss for an in-state kid. I think Jeremy Pruitt and Tennessee were frankly a little pretty shocked this morning that they didn't get. Certainly been some rumors out there about him having committed to the staff in the past. Definitely a big loss, but shout out to Rodney Garner, Auburn's defensive line coach. He's been one of the best recruiters in the SEC since I was born 20 years ago. He had a great run at Tennessee in the late 90s, and if he's in on a kid, it's going to be tough to get. It's no surprise why Auburn. You look at Auburn; they have such good defensive lines every single season. That's just an elite recruiter and a great coach, and it's kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to watch because Pruitt has such an, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, such a emphasis on recruiting. Tracy Rocker, I think, has been the most impressive on coaching his unit staff on this team. But at the same time, his recruiting has not been at a level that I think Pruitt expects. And, I think that showed up again. Big in-state loss there. Big in-state loss a couple months ago when Trayvon Ripka committed to Kentucky. But it'll be interesting to see, how all that shakes out, where Tennessee moves under board now. Tyler Barron's still the biggest target left in Knox Catholic native. Again, another guy I think Tennessee feels pretty good about. But it'll be interesting to see going forward. It'll be interesting to follow what coaching changes Pruitt makes after the season. But we'll be focused more on Kentucky as going forward this week. We'll have a preview out on the Wildcats and full coverage of this weekend's matchup in Lexington. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.